Going to attempt to make this one as concise as possible because it's early days in the election cycle, the American election cycle, which of course is famously long. By the time we get through all the primaries and all, and that's we're not even in 2024 yet. Um, but it's worth commenting a little on because I think it's fairly clear now that we are going to see a rerun of 2020, or at least there's a strong chance. Because I think in both cases of the Democrats and the Republicans, it seems certainly in the Democratic side, I don't think there'll be serious opposition to Biden's renomination. And I think on the Republican side, Trump still has a very strong base. So that's the situation. Both men are going to run again. So it's sort of like the 50s when Eisenhower and Adlai Stevenson had a rematch. Eisenhower won both times. Except America, I would say, is in a far more toxic situation than even the 50s and even the issues that were faced then in terms of the partisan divide. It's always been there. There's never been an American election that's been completely peaceable and without tensions. It's always been there. There's always been partisan mudslinging. There's always been a degree of hostility. And that's to be expected in a big country, um, world's third most populous country, with two major political parties. That's the nature of democratic politics. But there is something at this time that is exceptionally partisan, I think. And I'm not sure there's ever been a comparable situation. I try to think back, let's say the 1968 Democratic Convention. Big controversy there was the Vietnam War and the violence outside the convention hall in Chicago, but that was from protesters angry with the Johnson administration. Um, the 1960 election, I've just watched John Kennedy's very upbeat election slogan. It looks very dated now, but it was upbeat. That was a very close election, and it was quite a fractious election between JFK and Nixon. But there was never, I think, it never got to the point of such partisan bitterness. I mean, in 1960, I think Democrats and Republicans could still have a drink together, broadly speaking. Um, Even if we look at more recent years, let's say Clinton Bush 1992, that was quite a tense race, but never got to the point of hatred. And before he passed away, Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, done a lot of campaign and humanitarian work together. So again, it never got to that level of bitterness. The 96 campaign, Clinton versus Dole, there were some sharp words said, but it was largely civil. In his autobiography, My Life, Clinton mentions that Dole had a negative campaign on the day I think it was his mother passed away, and he felt hurt by that, but Dole later apologized. The 2008 campaign, Obama versus McCain, had tensions. There was barbs on both sides, but John McCain, to his eternal credit, showed his decency by standing up to some of the more racist elements of his supporters. He'd done that because it was the right and decent thing to do, which is why Obama spoke at his funeral. Um, come to today, and the situation is it's so toxic. I don't think we can make any comparison. Maybe going back to some of the early elections, Andrew Jackson and so on, those were pretty tense. And of course, leading up to the Civil War. But certainly in modern times, I can't think of anything like this. Um, this is a cover of the UK version of The Spectator recently. Don versus Ron, quite an interesting cover. So the message there is it's DeSantis versus Trump. The interesting thing about Ron DeSantis is he's sort of like a mini Trump. I mean, he chose a lot of the same narrative about standing up to the woke and so on. The thing is, he's younger. He's been quite a strong governor of Florida. I understand he has quite high opinion polls there. I could be wrong about that. That's my perception. I personally think that there will be Americans questioning should it not be a younger generation all around. The combined age of these two men, Donald Trump will be 77 at the time, Biden will be 81, if I've got that right. We're talking a combined age of over 150. Um, in the 2020 cycle, again, there was a lot of older candidates in the race: Trump, Biden, Elizabeth Warren. Now, this is not to say that. In some ways, it's good that there isn't ageism in politics. I mean, Ronald Reagan famously quipped to Michael Dukakis, "I'm not going to use," or it might have been Mondale actually, "I'm not going to use my opponent's youth and inexperience against them." I'm not against an older candidate being nominated if they are capable. And indeed, some impressive world leaders have been in the dawn of their years. In this country, we've had Churchill, Palmerston, and Gladstone, all considered among our greatest prime ministers, and they were all in their 70s and 80s whilst in office. Um, but I do think, certainly in the case of Biden, there are issues around age. Now, before I talk a bit about this, I want to make a caveat, and I should have probably done this at the start of the video. Obviously, I'm not American. I completely respect this is up to Americans to decide. I've also always made this caveat. Outsiders will naturally be interested in the direction of the United States because it is the most powerful country in the world. So, people say, "Oh, mind your own businesses." This is what comes with being the global hegemony, with what is being the global superpower now. Domestic issues are domestic issues ultimately, but naturally, the rest of the world is interested in what happens in America because it's the world's most powerful country. Economically, China may or may not surpass the United States in the next generation, but as it stands, in every way, the United States is the most powerful country. Whether it's the greatest country is another question. In many international rankings, actually, America lags behind. But that's another debate. Um, I'm pro-American. I think you know it is so critical that the United States gets the upper hand if we're in a new Cold War with regards to Russia and China. It is so critical. That doesn't mean I agree with all American policies, and I certainly don't agree with everything that happens over there. And there are many differences between this country and the United States. I think it's a mistake to conclude that because we have a special relationship, because we have a long relationship, that we think alike in every sense. There are differences between Britain and America. We're a monarchy, they're a republic. A lot of the woke dogma that's come into this country, I would argue, has been imported from the United States. There are differences. The gun violence thing is a glaring one. We just don't have that same level of violence. Not comparable. Not comparable. Um, Now, I'm not going to get into a big long assessment of Biden's presidency because that will come later. But very briefly, it's been mediocre at best. He made his official sort of announcement of running yesterday, I believe it was, and it was a perfectly decent ad. It was optimistic. It was very inclusive and pluralistic and showing a wide range of people, and it was hopeful. And it was kind of a standard campaign ad. It was nothing wrong with it. The problem is that it's very easy to do. It's very easy to put up a polished campaign ad. When Joe Biden speaks, his age does sometimes betray him. Those gaffes could turn into something more serious. And I don't think this is ageism. I think this is a legitimate question. Can this man really do 4 more years? I mean, when Reagan was only in his 60s, he was considered old then in the 1980s, and already the signs of Alzheimer's are setting in now. What if these gaffes are representing something more serious? Biden himself obviously feels that he's ready for 4 more years. He's physically fit. I mean, he hasn't had any major surgery or anything like that. But these gaffes shouldn't necessarily be dismissed. They could be a sign of perhaps deeper cognitive problems. I don't think it's stupid, but I think he does put his foot in it more often than not. Most recently, or at least one of the most recent occasions, was in this country in his Belfast speech when he confused the New Zealand All Blacks with the Black and Tans. And that might be a slip of the tongue. We can forgive that. This sort of thing happens all the time with Biden. Yeah. Um, the Afghanistan debacle will always overshadow his presidency. Although, to be quite honest, Trump was talking about talking to the Taliban as well. So I think that's it's disingenuous for him to imply that he wasn't going to do exactly the same thing. And quite honestly, I think that was a poisoned chalice. I think there's no easy answers when it came to Afghanistan, but could it have been handled a lot better? Certainly. Um, I think when it comes to Ukraine, Biden's done well. I think he's, absolutely done what he had to do. He's stood up to um, a hostile power that invaded a smaller country. I think it would be unconscionable for America to have done nothing, which some on the hard right would favour. But those people are also basically shameless Putin apologists. So when it comes to Ukraine, I think Biden has shown resolve. China, again, he's shown resolve. Any notion that Biden's weak, he's actually been quite hawkish with regard to China. Um, Trump would love to portray Biden as weak, but looking at the two men and their track record, Biden has been a lot tougher on Russia. Trump has failed to even condemn Putin's excesses on the day of the invasion, and I think this is unforgivable. What Trump came out with to say it was a mark of genius, um, not verbatim, but along those lines, is repulsive, and it shows the logic, the narcissism of Donald Trump. That he was more interested in point scoring with a political rival than condemning the brutal invasion by a tyrant against a smaller neighbor. Um, that brings me to Donald Trump. I mean, I cannot comprehend how anyone can even think that this man deserves another chance at the White House. He had one of the worst presidencies on record. Every every academic poll shows that every academic study ranks Trump very near the bottom, on par with the likes of James Buchanan, literally among one of the very worst presidents. Maybe that will change over time. Maybe. Um, Harry Truman had very low approval ratings, and then 60 years on, he has quite high approval ratings. So maybe over time, the historians will have got it wrong, and Trump will have higher approval ratings. But because of his actions around January the 6th and around um, his toxic rhetoric, I think I can't see a situation where anyone other than his hardcore base is going to give him credit as anything other than the demagogue that he is. And Trump achieved some things as president. Credit where credit's due. He got some diplomacy going in the Middle East between Israel and Arab states. Um, he expelled, or rather, the State Department expelled Russians after the attack at Salisbury here in the UK and with Russia's nefarious behavior. But Trump's own track record on Russia is very, very questionable. The fact that he stood beside the Russian dictator and moaned about the American press just says it all. Um, I would want to be charitable and say he reached out to Kim Jong Un, but that was a failure. So for all the talk of Biden being weak, that Korean summit, Kim took Trump for a ride. He was used. Um, he failed to condemn the genocide against the Uyghurs in China. Um, so actually, Donald Trump has been very weak on foreign policy, and this narrative that he never started a foreign war, it's very, very misleading. Actually, Trump did take military action against ISIS, justifiably so, but he did. So you see these sort of charts like all these presidents started wars, Trump never did. Firstly, he was a one-term president, so you need to look at what defines starting a war. Look at Obama's first term. He had military action in Libya, but that was not a war started by the Obama administration. So it's just a false narrative to say that Trump was some sort of pacifist. That's a lot of nonsense. Um, but as an outsider, I don't see how someone this toxic, who by the way lost the popular vote twice, Trump's a loser. He's a loser. He lost twice. And people actually think this guy should be given another shot. He has an ongoing criminal investigation, numerous investigations. Now, even if that's politically motivated by the Democrats, this is not someone who is a statesman. This is not someone who deserves to be in the most powerful position in the world. He's a demagogue. I think he's thoroughly ignorant about history. Um, and I can't believe that people actually think he should be given another shot. Why? Because he rails against the woke left. So there's other Republicans that will speak against the woke left that will stand up to them. Trump is poison. Um, so yeah, that's my candid thoughts. I just don't see, not to mention the fact he failed to do absolutely anything on gun violence. That's true of all Republicans. Um, so yeah, I think America has a pretty bad choice this time around. I think it's a very weak choice. You have someone who panders to the woke left and their intolerance. Biden talks about compassion and unifying, but he's supporting narratives that deny women the right to define biology. For all the campaigning in favor of women's rights, reproductive rights, what about women's rights to define their own biology, i.e., define a woman? Because he wants to pander to the trans narrative. Um, and there's a lot of other issues going on. Democrat run cities are rife with crime. Biden has failed to, I accept that he can't be responsible for the specific running of every city, but he can do more to, put pressure on those Democrat mayors. But honestly, I think it's a very bad choice, and I'm concerned because I think when America's in a bad way, it reflects badly. It emboldens Russia and China and Iran. Um, I personally would like to see younger generations sort of fight this out because I think really, I mean, if it was me, if I was making a choice, I'd probably go for Biden in a sense of the better of two bad choices. I think Trump is toxic. I think he's dangerous. I don't think Biden is a demagogue. He doesn't have a cult following, which in itself is a good thing. But I think he's mediocre at best. Um, he won't go down as a great president. But Trump is a god awful president. I really think, yeah, it's a bad choice. So anyway, best wishes, America. But I think moderates in both parties need to seriously look at what direction this is going in. Moderate Republicans, I would urge them to get behind a moderate candidate. And by moderate, I'm not talking about left wing. I'm talking about fine, a traditional conservative, but Trump is toxic. The problem is he's turned such hatred against the moderates in his own party, people like Mitt Romney, that I think the rot has already set in. It's the way Trump has shamelessly pushed false conspiracy theories, lies, basic lies, very concerning. But hey, I'm an outsider. I'm just offering my take on this. It's up to Americans to decide. But I think 4 more years of either of these men could potentially be very bad. I think it would be worse if it's Trump, but I think it's bad enough with Biden. I think the Democrats should consider a younger candidate who maybe will continue some of Biden's policies, some of them, but also pitch a lot more to the center. That's my big concern about Biden. He's ignoring the center ground and he continues to pander to the woke left. That's divisive. I think he as an individual is not as divisive. I don't think he's a demagogue, but I think Biden needs to pander to the center a lot more and to moderates. That's my honest take.